There was an organization called Hamilton 68 that was the source of probably hundreds of news stories over the course of a period of years that was allegedly tracking Russian bots. Their secret sauce was a list of 600 accounts they said were linked to Russian influence. Well, in the Twitter files, we found the list. And the list, let's just say, is mostly bereft of Russians, but is full of real Americans. And what they basically did is a fraud. They took ordinary conversations of ordinary conservatives, mostly, and essentially just called it Russian influenced.
The Hamilton 68 is a fraud. Hamilton 68 out to stop Russian influence was actually out there to stop conservatives, stop pro-Trump trending, stop pro-Trump popularity, whether it was Charlie Kirk on down, which you reported earlier. But this 68 had an interesting way of doing things. They would take a trend, credit it to a Russian bot, and diminish its quality. But it wasn't just Twitter users. Then other entities, New York Times, Mother Jones, would go and build off this. So next thing you know, this would be pervasive all over mainstream media. Can you unwind that?
Yeah, so the key here is that they built this tool called the Hamilton 68 dashboard that purported to track Russian bots. Again, it was based on 644 accounts, which we now know are mostly organic accounts, mostly real people, mostly in the West. But they would say these accounts are now following, let's just say, the hashtag Fire McMaster, or hashtag Release the Memo, or hashtag I Stand with Laura, or hashtag Parkland Shooting. And then you would see a flood of news stories come out in the next day, maybe in the New York Times, maybe the Washington Post, maybe CNN, maybe MSNBC, that would say Russian bots are supporting this hashtag. In reality, there were no Russians, or there were very few Russians, let's put it that way. Most of these were actual real Americans who were just doing ordinary conversations on Twitter.
So Mike Morell, let's look at those four again. Mike McFaul, ambassador to Russia, certainly has credibility. Mike Morell used to brief Bush as well as Barack Obama, CIA guy. And then a Podesta, as left-wing as it gets, was supposed to be the chief of staff of Hillary Clinton, ran her campaign. And Clint Watts, an MSNBC contributor. So he could continue this false reporting as so-called experts in Russian bots on another news network. What is your reaction to this reality that this was taking place? And for those at home who wonder what kind of impact it had, what do you think?
I think these stories about Russian bots influencing this or that politician had an enormous cultural and political impact over a course of years in America. And although conservatives were definitely targeted, and in fact, Twitter employees talked about that, how this was a site that would take ordinary conversations between conservatives and accuse them of being Russians. You can see that in my thread. But it also affected Democrats like Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders. So this was a site that basically went after anybody who was a critic of the Democratic Party, be it on the left or right. And we see that in the composition of the list, which also includes people like the editor of Consortium, which is a progressive magazine.